a great feeling.
Let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Thursday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest news on our 700 islands in the sun. Call in and let your voice be heard during the show. Calling from Nassau, dial 326-8255. Calling in from Freeport, use 351-6175. You can also listen to the show streaming online.
Let's save the Bays.
The content of Voice of the Bays radio show is the property of Save the Bays, Coalition to Protect Clifton Bay, and is intended for general information purposes only. The views expressed by the show hosts or their guests are their own, and not that of Love 97. To learn more about Save the Bays, please visit their website at www.savethebays.bs or find them on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Our thanks, Bahamas, for your support.
Rise up, Bahamas, let your voices blaze. Stand up, Bahamas, come on, let's save the Bays. Clifton Bay, save it. Breakers Bay, save it. Liberty Bay, save it. Let's save the Bays. Rise up, Bahamas, let your voices blaze. Stand up, Bahamas, come on, let's save the Bays. God gave us this land and this land.
Whoever is the Prime Minister of the country. That trust has been incredibly criminally abused from the very beginning even before the UBP and continuing under the PLP and then under the FNM and then now under the PLP. And we must get this right. And why is it so significant at this particular stage in our development? Let me just give you a few facts that you must listen to very carefully. The Bahamas is an archipelagic nation made up of 100,000 square miles. 100,000 square miles. That out of the 100,000 square miles, there is only 6,200 square miles of land, a hard land. That is barely 6% of the total area of the archipelagic nation of the Bahamas. Now, the people in my studio this evening, I'm going to put some tough questions to them because I want to know how we're going to deal with the protection of our heritage for future generations when we are in the midst of sea level rise, when we are in the midst of climate change, and we're losing not just inches, but we're losing foot by foot every year of coastal area. And remember this, beloved Bahama land, we are basically at sea level. Most of our islands are barely above 2 feet above sea level. In fact, even you look at the international airport, that is 1 foot above sea level. And it is projected that by the end of this century, some 80% of our islands will be underwater. So what are we going to preserve and how are we going to preserve that for future generations? These are the areas I want to cover tonight. And in the studios this evening with me to help us get that information out and to familiarize our people exactly what has been going on, what should be going on, is the renowned Romi Ferreira. Good afternoon, Romi.
Good afternoon, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Romi is an advocate for our Bahama land, for our Bahamians. He is an activist in terms of the environment. He's an environmental lawyer. And I'm going to put him on the spot this evening because even though he's a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, he is now running for the FNM. And I want to know, Romi, what is the FNM going to do about this abuse of Crown land that has been going on for so long? And Diane Phillips, my renowned co-host. Always love to be here with you, Diane.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks for making this particular show about Crown land. I think that we hold in our hands a jewel that just needs to be polished, and it could make such a difference in creating a more stable economy if there was a good distribution of some portion of the Crown land. My urging would be to start with a published map. What do we actually have? is there really 30 million acres, as some have suggested, of Crown land that is still available? Are there really 30,000 applications that have not been answered yet? Are there really 5 to 10 applications that come in every day, but we cannot get any kind of answer as to what happens to them? And we are looking at one right now from 1997 that you just handed me, Joe.
1997, 20 years ago. And this particular gentleman, and I think he's listening now in Grand Bahama, and he would not mind me mentioning his name. His name is Mr. Gordon. And Mr. Gordon has applied for Crown land, barely 5 acres. Originally, 5 acres of Crown land at Lindsay's Bluff, Cat Island, to construct a drug store is acknowledged by, in fact, he did get an acknowledgement. And then at another point, he had asked for 5 acres. Originally, he asked for 25, but I think he was advised to ask for 5 to do farming. And he has yet to get any approval for any of those 20 years ago. And he has called in over and over again to find out when will he be given a mere 5 acres of Crown land on the island of Cat Island. Cat Island. Romi,
Hey.
let's get to you. Give us
me.
a little run by. Why was it so easy, traditionally, historically, for our Crown land to be given? That people who were supposed to have been the stewards of that Crown land, they sold it for a pot of porridge that we never even had a chance to taste.
Well, thanks, Joe. The first thing I want to encourage your listeners to keep in mind that the minister responsible for Crown lands is the Right Honorable Prime Minister. And the next thing I'd like to keep in mind is that according to the law, the Conveyancing Law and Property Act, I think it's section 54 to be exact, the disposition of Crown lands, he holds that for the benefit of all Bahamians. So the test, let me finish, let me make this point. The test that has to be satisfied in the disposition of Crown land is this for the benefit of all Bahamians? So whether we're talking about Peter Nygaard at Nygaard Key, or whether we're talking about Mr. Stephen Gordon, or Mr. Romal Ferreira, or Mr. Joe Darville, the test is, does this application for Crown land meet the requirement for the benefit of the Bahamian people? That is the acid test.
Okay, Diane, you wanted to.
I wanted to get clarification on something with Romi being the expert, the legal expert on this. What I read is that the Prime Minister holds this not in his capacity as Prime Minister or Minister of Finance, but as the trustee of Crown land. So in legal parlance, isn't trustee someone who holds it to make sure that it is preserved for the next party to come along, rather than holding it for the right of holding it or the ability to hold it?
He's holding it to dispose of it for the benefit of Bahamians, for the Bahamas. That is the test. So, sure, it's not in his name. It's not in the name. It's in the name of anyone who occupies that office. But the test, before they give it away, before they sign that Crown grant, the test is this for the benefit of Bahamians? So if let's apply that to this particular scenario that you set up. Mr. Stephen Gordon, I see this reference here. You wanted Crown land in Cat Island. You mentioned Grand Bahama. There are thousands of people who've applied for Crown land. I would imagine that amongst our listeners right now, there are tens of thousands of people who have applied. The test is it for the benefit of Bahamians? And so there's nothing remarkable about what Mr. Gordon is applying for. Foreigners come here all the time and get it. Foreign direct investment happens all the time. They come here broke with no land and get the Crown land and use it for collateral. So there's nothing remarkable about this. What's significant is that it doesn't happen for the ordinary Bahamian. You see? And that's why it's an issue. It doesn't happen for the most part, right? 99% of the people who apply for Crown land, I mean, he's lucky even to get a response. Most people don't even get a response.
Yeah, in fact, that was the first question I asked him, because he's a good friend, well, not acquaintance of mine in Grand Bahama. And I said, well, did you ever get a response? He said, yeah, I got a response. I applied 20 years ago, and I did get a response. Yeah. But then I've been following through with phone calls and even visits, and I have yet to get a definitive answer with respect to whether or not I am going to get 5 lonely little acres, you know, not on New Providence, on Cat Island.
So
Cat
this is
Island. So Romi, hold it here now. Give us some sort of psychological overview as to how this could have been perpetrated for so long in the archipelagic nation of this country that whoever became head of state could hold in his hand that scepter over every single inch of land and to be distributed at their own will and what do you call it? Favor.
Well,
Give us, why has that happened? Why have we Bahamians sat on our backside for so many years and years and years and allowed this to happen?
Well, according to Section 54 of the Conveyancing Law and Property Act, all the power that was held in Crown land before independence now becomes vested in the Minister for Lands. So he now has he's now holding this land for before it was Her Majesty acting through her agents that held this land in trust for the Bahamian people. And then we went through
in trust for the Bahamian people,
for the benefit
of Bahamian
so
people.
We're not talking about a trust instrument here. We're not talking about the creation of a trust instrument where there are trustees and the beneficiaries of it. We're not talking that. We're talking you are holding this for our benefit, on our behalf. You're looking out for us. You're looking out for our best interest. So that means then, anytime you sign on the dotted line, a part of your justification has to be, as required by law, you have to take into consideration, is this for the benefit of the Bahamian people? And so that's a reasonable test to ask anytime there's any dispensation of Crown land. Is this for the benefit of the Bahamian people?
Okay, Romi, hold that thought right there. How would it be actually determined that it is for the benefit of the Bahamian people? What are the rules and regulation parameters that will govern the operation of distribution to indicate that it is for the benefit of the Bahamian people?
Well, a big part of that has to do with who's doing the applying, who they know, who they're related to, who are their financiers. You get the trend? In other words, it's shrouded in mystery. So there's no list for the Bahamian people to go to and say, if I meet this criteria, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I will get Crown land of 1 acre. If I meet 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in addition to 5, I could get 10 acres. Or there's no island-specific criteria. If you meet this, you can get it in Cat Island. Or if you meet this, you can get it in Grand Bahama. Or you can get it for agriculture. Or you can get it in hotel. It is up to the whim and fancy of one man. One man. And so this is one of the unique features of our country, where one man has all this concentrated power, and they're not acting on our best behalf. This is the submission, and it's clear.
All right.
So anyone can see it.
Okay. So there hasn't been any sort of institutes or governing instruments in place that would kind of force a leader of our country, whether it's the present prime minister, former prime minister, going all the way back, even in the colonial times, that would say, I'm going to come to Romi Ferreira and find out whether or not the piece of land I'm giving to someone next door to him is beneficial to you. That there's nothing in place right now to be able to guide whoever is heading this nation, that you're saying.
And if it is in place, we certainly aren't privy to it. Because if Mr. Gordon, if Mr. Stephen Gordon, and I'm using him as an example.
Yeah, he doesn't mind.
We're not picking on him.
No, he doesn't mind me using
him as a
name.
classic case example. I am sure if he knew what the criteria was, he would fulfill the criteria, and he would write his letter would say, well, dear Minister for Crown Lands, we know the criteria is A, B, C, and D, and we on the 10th of September 1997, we fulfill criteria, and he could list them. And so his justification becomes that much more plain. And so all we've been asking all along is, what is this criteria? Tell it to us.
Okay.
What is it?
All right. Now, Di, you have some information with respect to inquiries that have been made. Bring us up to date on those, please.
Well, I'm not sure what the most current ones are, but I know that a few years ago there was a new organization formed called Crown Land for Bahamians. And at that time, the attorney for that organization, New Energy, Fred Smith, said Crown Land is held in trust by the state, with the Prime Minister alone being the statutory trustee of the land. Said the CLB, that's Crown Land for Bahamians, was recently incorporated. and is intended to highlight the perversion of foreign developers being given Crown land for nothing. Now, mind you, I always have this problem with everybody picking on foreign developers. That is not what Fred said. That's what Diane Phillips said. Being given Crown land for nothing, whereas there are thousands and thousands of Bahamians who have for decades applied for Crown land and have not even had the courtesy of a response. Sure. That's just like Mr. Gordon right there. And as Romi... Yeah, we got it in 1997. He got a response.
20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago.
Yes, and now and he said that he has continued to call to check on it. I have been told by people in the office dealing with it that they have multiple requests for the same land. And that is the reason or the excuse, however you want to look at it, that they are not able to make decisions, because if they give it to Joe Darville and Romi Ferreira has made a request for that same land, how do they decide that Joe Darville should have it, not Romi Ferreira? They said much of the land that is requested by Bahamians is the same land that another Bahamian is also applying for. But to finish what Fred Smith said in this particular release, said, "This is a new day and age in the Bahamas. The new organization will be suing the government for individual Bahamians for their entitlement. The new NGO will be setting up a register of applications." That's what I would love to see, a register of applications, and inviting all those who have made applications to register with the CLB, Crown Land for Bahamians, so that we can appreciate the extent of government abuse of our own Bahamian people. Under law, the Prime Minister cannot ignore applications. Under law, the Prime Minister cannot ignore applications. In deciding whether to grant or not, he could only take into account legally relevant factors, and he cannot take into account legally irrelevant factors, and the decision must be based on rational grounds, and he cannot act arbitrarily or politically. He must exercise his power for the benefit of the Bahamas, and the Bahamas consists of 375,000 Bahamian citizens.
Sure. The only point about that is you mentioned with foreign direct investment, foreign developers. What's interesting is what happens when Bahamians are applying for the same land as the foreign direct investment. You know, that's when you get the conflict between the local and the foreign. That's when you get it. And so I disagree. In terms of the benefit that they get is clear. Let's take Baker's Bay development. Baker's Bay got Crown land, I think it was 50 cents an acre?
$1.
$1 an acre. $1 an acre. $1 an acre for prime real estate in the Abaco Keys on the beach.
Okay, that's a very hot topic.
An acre.
We're going to take a break here, Romi, because I want to come back, because I want to ask you a good amount of questions.
Sure.
In that particular regard. But we're going to take a break and be right back. You're listening to Voice of the Bays, Environment Speaks. And you could call us, and this is an information session, because a lot of information has to be put out there. And I think the number is 326-3633. You could call us here at the studio in Nassau. You want to call through Shreveport. It's no longer Freeport, I guess. I'm trying to find a number here. It's 351-6176. So give us a call, and if you had problems with Crown land, we're going to be on this like white on rice, because we're going to put feet to the fire. Both the PLP and the FNM come in this general election. I want to be on the platform of both of them to find out from them, what are we going to do when we're going to be losing acre and acre in the next 100 years? What are we going to pass on to our children as a heritage? They're going to curse us to hell if we don't do something about what's happening at present. And I'm not blaming any government, present or past. I'm blaming them all. We're going to take a short break and be right back.
The summer's hot. Don't sweat it. Cool down after a hard day's work in your own pool from Goodnight Pools. They have the best quality and service on the island. Everything works perfectly. Goodnight Pools puts quality and excellence in every swimming pool. It's like bathing in heaven. You should call Goodnight Pools of Nassau at 397-1050. Located on Montrose Avenue. Goodnight Pools will let you cool in your dream pool.
Right Rise up Bahamas and let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Thursday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest
Welcome,
news
ladies
on our
and
700
gentlemen,
islands.
Bahama
on
land
the
and
sun.
my beloved
Call in and let
Bahamians.
your voice be heard during the show. Calling from
Crown land for
951
Bahamians.
268
Oh my, this is a hot topic because, you know, I own a little strip of land in Long Island and it's up on a hill, and I hope to leave it to my children so that as the sea level rises, Romi and Di, I want to make sure that they have some place where they can build a home in 100 years down the road, because we're going to lose a whole lot of our land, Romi.
Sure.
And we have a sad situation in Guanakee,
Yes.
where Bahamians are sandwiched between two developments.
Sure.
One you just quoted, Baker's Bay, which got hundreds of acres of land, $1 an acre, seafront, beautiful beach, and then on the other side, then with a little sandwich in between that development, and I think it's Orchid Bay is the next development. Bahamians are sandwiched in between. They are producing children, grandchildren. They have no heritage to call their own. All of their land on that beautiful Guanakee has been given away basically to foreign developers. We love foreign developers, there's no doubt about that. But respect our people, respect our land. How are we going to deal with that, Romi?
You think we want to introduce this concept now called environmental justice. In the dispensation of Crown land, you can't forget environmental justice, that concept of environmental justice. And you have to ask yourself, was environmental justice done to the people of Guanakee? I mean, did they receive that when the land was given away for $1 an acre, sandwiching them in, pricing them out of the market? Now that same land sells for millions. The point I was making at the very beginning is that the basis of all wealth in this country is land. You see, we're at this fabulous new facility here at Love 97. The basis for this is the land this
On which
studio
on which
is
it
on.
sits.
That is
Exactly.
the basis. That
And-
is the basis of the wealth of Mr. Jones.
And it's on a hill,
And
hilly
it's on a hill.
area. So Mr. Jones is going to be here for a long
For a
time.
long
Go, ain't
time.
no ocean going to come up here while during his lifetime.
But if people are given the opportunity to own Crown land, what they're really being given the opportunity is for wealth creation for their children and their grandchildren.
And
That's
security.
what they're being given the opportunity, wealth creation. And so with the original Crown grants that went out to the loyalists, when the whole country was essentially given away by the king, what he was doing was giving them wealth. When the state of Maryland was given to Lord Maryland, he was given Lord Maryland and Lord Maryland's descendants wealth forever. The dispensation of Crown land is the creation of wealth for Bahamians. And so it is imperative, essential, absolutely essential that the rules for the dispensation of that Crown land be made public and known to the public, because it affects everybody. You see, it affects everybody. And so when we talk about environmental justice, we have to take, did the people in Bimini receive environmental justice when that development was foisted on them and they lost their fishing grounds and they lost the right to access a part of the island that they live on and they themselves were sandwiched? I mean, this concept of environmental justice has to be taken into account because we're competing for the same land resources and everyone wants what they think is the best part. So it's not just, it's not just Bahamians, multiple applications by Bahamians for a parcel of land or the same parcel of land. There's foreign direct competition in there as well. And so it is where your government prioritizes you as a citizen. Where do you fit in? We already know, we've already seen the egregious examples where they come here with nothing, not even a pot to put water in. They come here with nothing. They get Crown land, they sell it, they leverage it for money. That's the development model that the Bahamas is using to attract foreign direct investment right now. But what about Bahamians? What about us? Regardless of skin color or ethnic origin. Once you got that Bahamian passport, what about us? And our applications and our dreams? What about the dreams of our children?
Well, there are a lot of things that make us angry in this nation, and I'm going to get to both of you later on, because in my estimation, the level of criminality, the level of crime in this nation is directly predicated upon the dispossessed people in our land. When young people own nothing, they're going to destroy or they're going to steal from other people, and they're going to kill you for it because the morality level is so low that they got no example, whether from the home or from the church or from the community or even from the government, to really value other people and their property. So we're going to get in that a little bit, Diane, because that is something that I have been warning this government and previous governments about a long time ago, that unless you give some ownership to young people in this country, they're going to destroy the country. And you cannot blame them, really. You cannot blame them. Well, I cannot blame them because, well, because we're at fault. There's some more information you want to give us. And then I want to ask you, we have this scenario where we don't know anything about what is being given away, and not in our name, because no one ever came to ask me, can I do this in Joe Dowell's name? But how are we going to set up a system where there can be accountability for every inch ongoing of our crown land that's going to be given to whether it's a foreigner or whether it's a Bahamian?
Well, I think that so much of this ties back into freedom of information. And for all those people who say, freedom of information, that's ethereal, it's esoteric, it's for somebody else to worry about. Every application for Crown land should be available for the public to see. Back in 2014, the story that I was quoting before, when the acting director of Lands and Surveys, Richard Hardy, told the Tribune that his department receives about 5 to 10 applications for Crown land daily. He said, when asked how many people have been granted Crown land so far, in 2014, he said he would have to take instructions from the Prime Minister about whether that information should be given. So Fred Smith's argument to that was, despite inquiries by journalists, the department has refused to make available the statistics, again demonstrating the need for a Freedom of Information Act. Why the secret? What can possibly be the reason for our Prime Minister to refuse to tell people how many applications have been made, who have made them, and for where? Why is that not our right to know? And back to your question, Joe, or your statement about people owning things. Are you going to take the same care of someone else's stove and oven and clean them as you would your own stove and oven?
Well, we are a nation of indentured slaves, servants. There is no ownership in the magnificent establishments in this country. Bahamians do not own them, and therefore we are continuing slave labor, even if we are paid for it, and all work is honorable. And I know most Bahamians appreciate their jobs, and they do an honorable job. But the fact is, it got to be at the level at the time that the vast majority of employees in this country are not servants only, but they are owners. And I have advocated for years that there is enough Crown land in this country to at least give a certificate of ownership to every single young person.
And that gives them pride and something to build on. And if it's a small cottage or a farm. Look what just happened to us, Joe, tonight on our way here. I parked my car at the Hilton for an hour and a half to come do this show with Joe so we could ride out here together and discuss the contents. Joe is actually staying at the hotel. He's a guest. As of today, the parking rate at the Hilton for guests is $17 a day. You are forced to valet. I was forced to valet for $17 a day. Now that is not the Hilton's, that is not the management company, the hotel management. That is the ownership basically saying to Bahamians, you are invited, but you are not welcome.
Just imagine that, Romi. $17, I think it's 50 cents too. 17, and listen, when I drove up tonight, even the valet was embarrassed to tell me that increase, that it was a phenomenal increase.
Started today,
the 1st of March. Now, how can that ever happen? Who regulated that? Who was actually consulted to be able to allow them, for a local Bahamian to drive into that property and to be told that, we're going to park your car in a valet park, and there's no parking downtown. And now we got this big highfalutin structure there, but Bahamians going to pay for it, Romi.
Right. So they're driving you to go into their big highfalutin structure.
Yeah,
to go and
exactly,
park.
exactly.
Well, that is a private issue. That
Sure, that's
I have
private land.
a personal beef with
That's
it,
private
but it's private land. That's a business. If it doesn't work, then they'll go out of business, or their business will decrease, and they'll change their business model. But I have a grave concern with that same kind of disrespect being shown to us by our own government.
Well, what I find interesting is that you're essentially pricing Bahamians out of the market.
That's right,
So
exactly.
it's a brand new form of apartheid.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
yeah.
driven by the dollar. It's not driven by, because if you're black or white and you can't, there are poor white people here as well. So once you could pay the money, you could join the club.
And just as
So-
regular working white
Yeah,
people.
it's basically
So,
so,
they're
well,
not all poor or
if
rich.
you want parking around in this area, in downtown our city,
Yeah.
you go down to what do you call it, Arawak Key, and you could park down there, and then you could walk up here.
But I want to get back to your original question. You know, you have all these applications for Crown land. There's no justification on why it's done, right? We know that if you fall into the category of friends, family, or financier, you get the Crown land. The reason why Mr. Hardy has to defer, or had to defer, to the Prime Minister, because he can't release the information. He was told, don't release the information. That's why that's the underlying premise. I can't release the information. Why can't you? Well, someone must have told him. So he has to defer to the Prime Minister. And I'll tell you something. The reason why they won't tell you what these criteria are is because they can't stand up to scrutiny. The reason why you keep things secret is because if you say, here's condition A, B, C, and D, all of a sudden now you have to defend those positions, because people say, well, why is this an A and why'd you put B there? And they cannot defend the position on the dispensation of Crown land. And it's not just the giving away of Crown land, it's what you allow people to do on our Crown land as well. For example, you made the point, 100,000 plus square miles of the Bahamas, most of it is underwater. All of the seabed is Crown land. All of it. We're involved in a court matter right now at Nygaard Key, where permission was given to dredge approximately 140,000 square feet of our Crown land.
Our seabed.
Our seabed, which is Crown land, 140, which is as big as the land on the conveyance itself. I mean, how can that kind of logic cannot stand up to scrutiny? And that's why it's a secret, because they know that it cannot stand up to scrutiny, and that's why they won't disclose.
Well, you know, Romi and Di, I never like to, praise myself or praise my organization, Save the Bays, but we have been the salvation of many situations in this country. It was our organization that started the rampage for freedom of information, and hopefully the PLP government will put it in place. Like I said, I don't blame any government for the mischief and the wrong that they've done. They're all stand condemned. I'm the judge, the jury, and the condemner right here, because they have done with our heritage that should never have been done. They sold our souls out for a pot of porridge. We own nothing. Tens of thousands of our young men in this country cannot even say, I own a square inch of land. Now, how do you expect them to respect anything in this country? So, we have to begin to get down to grassroots. Now, Romi, I'm coming after you die then. Romi, when I'm coming to you,
Sure.
think carefully, because if the FNM gets into power, and I'm no political person, I've voted for FNM and PLP, probably more times for the PLP than FNM, because I had a lot of friends in the PLP. I got all of my students in the PLP, in cabinet, etc. So, and then when they say I want to undermine, I can't undermine my own former students. I don't even own a baby gun, so how I'm going to take down the government? But we have been responsible for actually shutting down the PSA that they wanted to revise, so that we would have no say in what happened to our land, period. We were the ones who initiated the whole movement towards the freedom of information. And we're proud that 25 other organizations has joined in us full force to make sure that we going forward, whether under the PLP, FNM, not the DNA, probably, but one of the PLP or the FNM, that we're going to have in place what it is necessary. And as long as I'm on this planet, I'm going to fight for that, for the good of future generations in this country. So I'm going to come to you and ask you, what are your plans? If you're running for the FNM,
that's what I think it ought to be, the FNA, the Free National Alliance.
I thought, oh, that's a Freudian slip. I didn't mean that. I had that not even in my mind. But let's come to that. Think about it a little bit, and Di, come in, please.
All right, just wanted to say that we did rescue the greatest crown, and I can't say we rescued, but the people of the Bahamas rescued what would have been the greatest crown land giveaway of all times, which would have been that 20,000 acres with the $2.1 billion in agri-fishing and farming deal with China. I mean, if we had not seen that, and that had slipped through, that 20,000 acres would be gone.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, while Romi is making his notes so that he has all the information down, it was interesting that there was a little clip on social media, right after I'm done, social media the other day showing these farmers in Abaco loading all this produce in the back of the car. Lo and behold, who were they? They were Chinese.
Right, well, because a Bahamian supposedly holds the farm and the Chinese actually own it.
So you mean we can't get Bahamians hired to work on that farm? I was told that they were given the land under the condition that they were going to employ Chinese laborers to produce Chinese vegetables for Chinese restaurants and Bahamas. Now, if I can be contradicted, I would love to be contradicted. We're going to take a break. We'll listen to the Voice of the Bays. The environment speaks, and as you can see, we speak forcefully, truthfully, and vociferously, and joyfully for our Bahamian people. We're going to take a short break and be right back.
I'm going to call a contact in.
Well, great God Almighty, where you going in that frilly band-aid?
I get one of these for you, too.
I ain't wearing no tutu for nobody.
Just get elastic in the waist. Listen, we ain't got nothing to do on weekends, right? So I figure we could get us a little gig as the Super Wash cheerleaders.
What you know about cheerleading?
Ain't nothing to it. You never watch football, eh?
I know one thing. You ain't climbing up on my shoulder, especially with that little short skirt.
The plan is for us to visit every Super Wash a weekend. All we can do is jump around, little piece, kick up your leg, and wave your pom-pom.
I ain't no puppy show. I ain't kicking up my leg for nobody. The last time I do that, I pull every muscle from my neck to my toe, and I was 20.
Believe me, when the Igler see this, he won't believe his eyes.
Yeah, he won't be the only one. Super Wash, they washes your process, it cleans you 24/7.
Rise up, Bahamas, and let your voices blaze.
Bahamas, your Save the Bays team is live on air once a week to give you your environmental update on your country, our beautiful Bahama land. Join us on Voice of the Bays radio show each Thursday on Love 97 from 5 to 6 p.m. to hear the latest news on our 700 islands in the sun.
Again, good afternoon, Bahama land, and welcome to the Voice of the Bays. The environment speaks. And we're speaking about the environment today. We're talking about the physical environment. We're talking about the land and the sea, the seabed, the coral reefs, the mangroves, and all of those things that make up the beautiful archipelagic nation. Sure. And I'm glad that the Prime Minister begins to quote me, because every time I got on, say, out in outer space as the astronauts circle the globe, they would determine which was going to be the most beautiful spot on the planet.
Sure.
And as I circled, they determined that the archipelagic nation of the Bahama Islands was the most beautiful spot on the planet. And I just want to add this little bit in there. I attended the 400,000 people march for climate change in New York about a year and a half ago. Okay. And amongst hundreds of people walking the streets, they had these two huge globes of the whole planet that was revolving on these machines as they went up the avenues. And I looked at it, and then I waded through hundreds of people, and I got up to the gentleman who was controlling the revolution of the planet. And I said, "Could you stop it for one moment?" And he said, "Why?" I said, "I want to ask you, when it begins again, to stop and show me the most beautiful spot on that globe," because I had already seen everything that was on there. I watched about 10 of the revolutions. And as it went around, he slowed it. When he came to the Bahamas, he said, "That's the Bahamas." I said, "Yes, that's where I'm from." And I showed him the Bahamian flag I was wearing. So not only from the astronauts, not only from my vision, but from all of those people who saw that globe revolving, our beautiful nation was the most beautiful spot on the planet. And I call it, and I got to copyright this, I call it the gem of Mother Earth. Go ahead, Romi.
The gem
of Mother Earth.
Beautiful. Well, I'll tell you, the gem of Mother Earth, the crown land of the gem of Mother Earth, belongs to the Bahamian people. The Minister of Lands holds that in trust on behalf of the Bahamian people. I am the F&M's candidate for Marathon. I'm an environmentalist. I'm very proud of that. I'm an ecologist and an attorney. Right? I'm very proud of that. And because the crown land is held on behalf of the Bahamian people, and because the F&M has announced that it's the people's time, that means then that what we do is in the interest of the people. So one of the first things we will do upon being elected is to take an assessment of the existing crown land, to find out how much crown land do we have left? How much do we have left? We can speculate. I've heard the speculation myself. I've been involved. I've been practicing 26 years, 27 years. I've heard the speculation. Anywhere from 30% of the Bahamas to 80% of the Bahamas is crown land, depending on who you ask. So to end that speculation, an inventory of crown land will be taken. Second big thing.
Oh, sorry. Are you sure that that wasn't done with the National Development Plan?
Well, I am not. It may have been.
It's very important to have that inventory.
I went through the National Development Plan because I was part of the whole ceremony, as you were there, part of it or something, and that was not mentioned. I didn't see that anywhere in terms of the actual amount of crown land that there is, but that is something I'm sure that is lodged in the Department of Lands and Surveys. Go ahead.
Right,
continue.
and after the assessment of the existing crown land, because it is the people's time, we will take a look at the existing applications, whether from locals or whether from foreign direct investment or local investment. Where are these applications happening? What is it that the people want? Because bear in mind that we understand that the entire country is a coastline. Our entire Bahamas, ecologically speaking, is nothing but coast. The reason why people come here is for the coast. There's no illusion about that. Because what we want to put in place is sustainable development, right? We want to put in place sustainable development. What does that mean? Well, that means then that the development agrees with the environmental conditions that we find there. And it will last into generations. So my great-great-great-grandchildren can experience the same abundance, the same pristine, clear waters, the same opportunities to build and own land as I do. And then we will promulgate clear rules on how to go about making these applications. And I cannot emphasize the importance of sustainable development in our promotion of our economy. Because let's look at Bimini. We have a development there by Resorts World that their own environmental impact assessment says it is not sustainable. You see? So this is clearly, from an environmental point of view, a bad development. Clearly. So why would you then go ahead and do it? Why would you then go ahead and take away the Bimini National Park? Why would you then go away and give them the crown land? We want sustainable development that includes the community. You cannot apply the same blueprint to development that we have in New Providence, to Guanakee, Abaco, to Acklands, to Cat Island, to Bimini. You know why? Because even though we're all one, we're all different. All the different islands are unique in and of themselves. The people that live in these islands are all unique. They're all special. They're all our brothers and sisters. They're all the Bahamian people. And it's the people's time. So if it's the people's time and it's the people's land, then it must be driven by clear rules that benefit the people and not just friends, families, and financiers. So never again can somebody come into this country, any developer, and not get the requisite permits and just do what they want to do. See, that is an insult to the people. Because if it were me or you, you'd be in jail. So what we're saying is that development that respects the land, respects the people, respects their ecology, but more importantly, you have to respect our laws. Never again. It is a crying shame that we can have someone that come in this country and just because they give a donation, they can flout our laws. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. What are the laws there for? They're laws for us and not them? No. The universal respect for our laws, according to our plans for the integrated resource development of our country. This is first and foremost what an FNN government is going to deliver. Integrated resource management, sustainable development, not land giveaways that don't stand up to public scrutinies or backdoor deals that we never hear about. Right? Because that deal in Andros, the land they was giving away is about the size of New Providence.
Exactly.
They're giving away the whole of New Providence.
The whole of New Providence in one thing of
So what could be left for Stephen Gordon?
Yeah, exactly.
What's going to be left for him?
Yeah.
We cannot, God isn't in the business of making new land.
Well,
Not as far as I
listen,
know.
Romi.
Not in the Bahamas.
Romi, if the FNM, and by the way, I want to make a disclaimer here. I am not supporting the FNM or the PLP. Let me make that very clear. Save the Bays is not. I'm the chairman of Save the Bays, and I am not. But we would like to have someone from every political entity, PLP, DNA, any of the other smaller groups, on our show to tell the Bahamian people what would be their plans for Crown Land if they were to win the government. And so I have asked, in fact, Diane to make investigation to all of these groups, and beginning hopefully with the PLP, the Minister of the Environment, to come on the show, and I could ask him the same. I don't believe in badgering anyone. It'll be a polite discussion as to what will be the changes. And Romi, I want to say here that you will be revolutionary in this regard, because your party, how long you've been FNM, but the FNM and the PLP, they've both been at fault in terms of how they've disregarded, dispossessed Bahamians of their heritage and their beautiful Crown land.
I would like to explore that. Right?
Okay.
We live in a country that's a parliamentary democracy. As a matter of fact, we're the oldest parliamentary democracy in the region. We are. And notwithstanding, there have been inroads against our democracy. There's been the spy bill, which is an inroad. There's been a government that ignores court orders. That's an inroad against democracy. Yeah. There's been intimidation against the judiciary. There's been hacking of emails where private emails were read by the member of parliament for Marathon. See, those are inroads into constitutional protections and inroads into our democracy. Exactly. There have been reports, fuel leak in Marathon by Rubis, where the information was held for over a year and people were dying of cancer, contaminated water. So what I'm saying is that leadership is a function in this country of the Prime Minister. The buck stops there, and the nature of the government, of every government that we have had, the nature of every government that we have had so far is behooving to the character of the man that sits in the chair of the Prime Minister.
Amen. Romi, if I'm still alive and around for a couple of years, when all of these revolutionary, modern, necessary instruments are put in place, I will come back to salute you and your government if you're in power. But I'm hoping that also the PLP or any other political entity can make those same pledges, because they are irrevocably what should be done in this country. Because as long as I'm on this planet, I'm going to fight for my people to make sure they own something. I want to put something to the public. I'm a little bit afraid to say it because I don't want a rush for it. But the fact is, as the sea level rises, the only thing that's going to be sticking out of the water in the Bahamas are the higher lands, the hills, etc. Mm-hmm. And they're not found on all of the islands.
No.
Some got hills between 75 feet up to almost like 200, a little over. I think Cat Island has the highest hill. Long Island has coupled at like 170 feet. So there's a good portion of land which, even if we were to be submerged, and they said 80% of our islands by the end of this century, if the sea level rises continue, the carbon footprint continues to exist, we will be underwater most of our islands. So the only parts that will be sticking out would be the hilly sides. Mm-hmm. So please now, preserve those for Bahamians, for God's sake. And a lot of those hills are still Crown land. Mm-hmm. They should be the first to be preserved for our people, to make sure that as they lose their lands at the sea level and just above the sea level, they will have land to go up to. They will have places to take refuge.
Sure.
They will have provisions to build their homes above the sea level. So those are the things that have to be looked into as you decide exactly what is going to be done, how Crown land is to be distributed, where it's found, and then I would say on every island where there is hilly country, there should be at least 2/3 of the land that is Crown land that's above sea level reserved for mitigation against climate change so that our people can move up and survive. This is not something that a lot of people say, you know, well, Matthew and Joaquin were punishments by God. They're not punishment. God doesn't punish. They were warnings by Mother Earth. Pay attention to my changes. Sure. Make preparation for my changes. Just like in Noah's time, the people didn't listen because Noah knew that there was going to be a flood. Noah knew that the sea level was rising, and so he prepared himself. And I teach in our environmental classes and so forth, I say to my young people, and I say to young people generally, and in fact Save the Bays has actually sponsored a boat building class at the children's library in Grand Bahama, teaching them how to build boats. And I say to them now, learn how to build boats. You mean, this is not the first time in the evolution of the earth. This has gone every 4,000 years or so. There has been dramatic change of climate change. Mm-hmm. We are exacerbating it, making it worse by our carbon footprint, and so it's 300 times faster than it has been in the previous cycles. And so we have to know how to prepare for that. And so I tell my people, build boats, build an ark, because you remember down in the South Pacific, they had mountains and they had to climb up, and then even as the mountains and the sea rose, they built boats in preparations to move, and that's why you have the same type of people in Hawaii as you have in New Zealand, because then they had to take to the higher grounds on different islands in New Zealand. So these things happen, and they're not a punishment by God. This earth is a dynamic system. She is alive. It is. She's alive. We breathe her. She breathes us. She gives us everything, and she goes through these cycles. So let's be prepared, my Bahama land. Die.
Well, I just found out one thing. We were giving out the wrong telephone number. We're wondering why all these people who have applications in for Crown land, the actual number is 326-8255. So whoever has the number of 3633, we apologize on behalf of Love 97. Everybody getting used to the new studio, I imagine.
Lord, I guess so.
Well, what you're saying is so true. We have to respond to climate change, and the only way to respond to that is sustainable development.
Amen.
To protect our mangrove systems, to protect our coral reefs,
the seabed.
Those are actually the climate change mitigating functions that Mother Earth has given us. As mighty God has given those to us. As custodians, it's the Garden of Eden all over again.
Amen.
And
Amen.
it is a travesty to give away Crown land and to destroy Crown land just for your friends and your family and your financiers. We're saying that amounts to mismanagement of Crown land.
This is beautiful.
That amounts to mismanagement of it.
Listen, Di is someone who's always promoting and fostering sustainable development.
Sustainable development, because she has
some good examples in the Exuma Keys. I think we got a call on the line. Skibo, you better come and help me take this, because I don't want to cut them off unnecessarily. Hold on, we just got a technician in here to make sure you're connected properly. Thanks for calling.
Now, we need economic development. The talk about preserving the environment does not deplete our interest in development.
That you must got to touch that first.
But bear with us, everyone. Everyone's getting used to this brand new studio.
And then Skibo expected me to do it, and Skibo got challenges too. Skibo, you and I getting too old, man, for this.
You're younger than Mother Earth, but sustainable development is so important.
And Di, go ahead, because you have some good examples.
The example of what's going to go in at Children's Bay Key and Williams Key off the Barataria in Exuma is could set the model. So someone who looked at it said it could actually set the model internationally, globally, that we could be a leader.
Hello, I think we have the call on the line now. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm calling in from Abaco.
Yes, ma'am.
Very positive and successful farm that is sustainable, environmentally friendly, totally off-grid, and I just want to call in support of good farming practices and crown land being used to develop more agriculture.
Okay, all right. Thank you very kindly for calling, and that's exactly what we want.
And are you
Go-
familiar in Abaco with the farms that are apparently being run by, I'm not sure if they're owned by, but being run by and for Chinese persons, large groups?
There is a farm right now being run by Chinese farmers, and as far as I know, managed by Chinese farmers in both the North and in South Abaco.
And that was Crown land?
Yes, it would be on Crown land that is designated farmland. I think in both cases they were previously farmed land that they have been able to utilize through Bahamian connections.
Okay, so they're Bahamian connections. So they're not wholly run by the Chinese. They do have a Bahamian connection.
Yes, they,
But there's one thing. Are the Bahamians also employed with the Chinese?
to the best of my knowledge, there are no Bahamians actually farming the land or actively participating in the sale of the crop. Recently, there was an outrage where the Chinese farmers in question pulled up in town across the street from the Royal Bank of Canada and were selling their produce out of their car, which I thought was a bit much for, them to be acting as local vendors on the street. And they were, 3 Chinese, no Bahamian in sight.
Okay, all right. Well, this is something I think that has to be looked into because this is reprehensible. This cannot happen in the country. Even if there is a Bahamian who owns the land and is given the freedom to hire people, there should be a certain proportion of Bahamians working on that land. And I find this, well, we were told that was the case, and that the main purpose of this was that there would be produce derived from there. And I got this from a very good source for Chinese purpose, restaurants, and eventually for Bahamas. Now, this is something, we thank you for calling. We're not putting you on the spot, but, this is something I think should be investigated to see why there aren't Bahamians at least partially working with them. And that's kind of an affront for them to just drive up in town without a permit and to sit there. I think that where any vendor normally would have a license, like the vendors do here in Nassau, if they're going to put their produce out there, they need to have a license to sell it. And so I'm hoping that they do have, and you have the right as a local Bahamian there in Abaco to go and ask them, do you have a license, a permit to sell your produce here in Abaco or in Marsh Harbor? Thank you so much.
To the best of my knowledge, I can't say that they had a permit or not, but I didn't speak very much English. So I personally did not see them, but I have seen videos and had reports from other persons that saw them. And as far as I know, they're also selling wholesale to the local grocers. And just one point I would like to make, that in the case of the Chinese or any foreign farmers growing in our country, as a certified organic farmer myself, I am concerned about our environment and the protection of our water and the use of chemicals that may or may not be controlled or even legal to use in the country. That the environment is my number one concern. sir.
Oh, amen.
Oh my God! Thank you so much for raising that particular issue, because we have an
I was
environmentalist
just
here,
thinking the same thing.
lawyer, and I'm going to have Romi speak to that,
Just
because
thinking the same
that's a serious matter. Particularly, we're in light again of climate change, sea level rise, and our very shallow water table, which is only like 4 or 5 feet below the ground. And as sea level rises, it's going to come up even to probably, as the sea salt water rises, the freshwater lens would be only probably 2 feet, if that, below the surface. So these are critical.
Absolutely. And sorry, one point that I think a lot of people miss when they think in terms of boundaries. Like my farm has a boundary, but the water under the ground doesn't have a boundary. There's
Agreed.
no
Agreed.
barrier.
Same thing with air.
Top of one swimming pool. So what crap literally goes into the land in one spot will find its way to the big pool.
Sure.
So that's
And
point
to the
that
lowest
needs to be
spot.
I
made
agree.
very clearly that there's no controlling it once it gets into that water table.
Okay, thank you very kindly for calling. We're going to take those issues very seriously, and we'll be doing an investigation in that matter. I salute Bahamians who farm. I salute Bahamians who work on the farm. I salute Bahamians who produce and sell their stuff. But the fact is, Bahamians should be magnificently 90% involved in any project that's going to be using our land, our crown land, even if it's private land. I don't think any private individual should have the freedom to hire foreigners to come and work on their land. So thank you very much for calling. Romi, address that.
Sure.
We have only 2 minutes, if anything, left. We're out of time. We're going to have to come back with this show, because we need to garner more information. We need to make further investigation with respect to crown land, etc. 2 seconds, final words, Romi, and Di, you 1 second.
Crown land is important, but the most important thing I would urge your listeners to do is go out and register to vote. Register to vote.
Amen. Di?
Register to vote, and as you vote, remember, the environment matters.
And I'm going to have both of them back, because Di has some really good examples of sustainable development that we could use as models, and I've even mentioned that to the Prime Minister in his office. I told him that that's the model that should be used for ongoing development, sustainable development on our little keys and our islands. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll be listening to a very exciting show and very informative. Voice of the Bays, The Environment Speaks, and my profound guests, Romi Ferreira and Di Phillips. And we'll be back, and hopefully next time or time after we have more information, I will have a PLP member of Parliament or someone from the environment here to speak on these same issues. God bless you. God protect and guide our Bahama land in all its beautiful aspects. Good night, everyone.
Clifton Bay, 7. Breakers Bay, 7. Bimini Bay, 7. Let's save the bays. Rise up, Bahamas, and let your voices blaze. Stand up, Bahamas, come on, let's save the bays. God gave us this land, and this land we must save. Stand up, Bahamas, come on, let's save the bays. A coalition's forming to stand up forward right to protect our Bahamas, and we're prepared to fight, protecting